Black Theology of Liberation, or Black Liberation Theology, celebrates Jesus' universal message of liberation and healing, and how that message reveals itself in African American culture. Again, this is my definition. Black Theology of Liberation, or Black Liberation Theology, celebrates Jesus' universal message of liberation and healing, and how that message reveals itself in African American culture. Restated, it answers the question, what is the positive relation between God and Black Americans? Therefore, at its basic root, Black Theology of Liberation is the joy, the celebration, and self-confidence of knowing that each person is personally created to be full human beings. And at the same time, the collective Black group is created to have its freedom. Each individual created in God's image means each person goes forth to help the community to achieve liberation and healing. In a word, the image of God, the imago Dei, leads to the mission of God, the missio Dei. Black Theology of Liberation, or Black Liberation Theology, is a way of practicing faith, thinking about faith, and celebrating faith that understands theology in the following way. First, the purpose of theology is to figure out if we are all being faithful to what God has called us to do, believe, think, and say. First, the purpose of theology is to figure out if we are all being faithful to what God has called us to do, believe, think, and say. Second, all theologies arise out of the materiality of context. Third, the role of theology is to reflect on how communities of faith interact. Fourth, theology is a discipline. Theology is both a discipline and a way of life that matters. That is to say, something is at stake in theology. And fifth, finally, theology helps us to build new individuals and new communities. It helps us to change the world. With that brief introduction, this discussion sharing today, this morning, follows three broad outlines. We are trying to understand the state of Black theology today by looking at the original context, that is, why did Black Theology of Liberation begin at the time and place that it began? So the first is the why question. Second, we explore what. What makes up the content and methodology of Black Theology of Liberation? And third, we finish with an examination of where. Where are some of the important directions in Black Theology of Liberation today? Why did Black theology begin at the time? What makes up the content and methodology? And where are some important directions in Black Theology of Liberation today? Let's begin with the historical context out of which contemporary Black liberation theology arose, or BLT. There are domestic and international reasons why it began in the time period and place of the 1960s. Black theology is dealing with questions and issues that arise from society. Here, Black theology deals with church and society. And from a strict theological perspective, Black theology saw itself responding to how Jesus was already involved in the liberation and healing of people. In this sense, Jesus' work was ahead of Black theology and Christian churches. And consequently, Black theology and our churches had to catch up with the incarnation of the Spirit among the oppressed people. Now, because Jesus was already showing compassion for the people, churches and Black theology needed to be involved in the communities of the people. Black BLT did not fall from the sky, from the head of an individual, nor was it created in itself, for itself, to perpetuate itself by itself. Black liberation theology did not center on the trauma of an individual person, and Black liberation theology did not begin separated from the material reality of African American everyday people. And finally, Black liberation theology did not develop independent from churches and other institutions of accountability. One of the most important things about Black liberation theology is that it did not start first in graduate schools. The hallmark contribution of Black liberation theology is that Jesus Christ is for the liberation of the poor, the oppressed, working class people, and the wounded. Therefore, Black theology is a theology of liberation for the poor, the oppressed, working class people, and the wounded. At the same time, it calls for a universal community of all people. If Christian faith and the historical Jesus point to having compassion for the least, the lost, and the left out, then this is a universal message for all people who want a healthy community on earth. It is also a vocation for those with disproportionate privileges to share in the building of community that is healthy, healed, and whole. So, the domestic context for the rise of Black liberation theology. The first reason BLT began is the domestic, specifically the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and Joseph Washington's book, which he titled Black Religion. The 1955 to late 1960 civil rights movement was led by Black churches and headed by a Black Baptist pastor, preacher, and PhD, Martin Luther King Jr. King used several ingredients to hold the movement together. He combined the theology of his enslaved ancestors with national liberation movements, Gandhian nonviolence, and the lofty ideals of the U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence. King's theology and African American church practice were new. They made the fight for freedom the defining objective of Christianity. And he called upon faith communities to actively change the world, even at the risk of physical harm. Consequently, Americans could not call themselves Christians if they violated the full humanity of other human beings. This was a revolutionary change from the prevailing American Christianity that had promoted, in the main, the ideology of profit and individualism. In contrast, King's life was a symbol of the civil rights movement, from his elected leadership of the 1955 Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott against legal segregation to his assassination on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. At the end, King interpreted the life of Jesus as liberation of the poor and the oppressed. We can see this if we look at his two final campaigns when he was killed. He was supporting the Black working class in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was also organizing a multiracial poor people's campaign to campaign in Washington, D.C., with the explicit purpose of disrupting the national government until poor people received jobs. King was a Black Baptist preacher, redefining how church could be church if it wanted to follow Jesus. Along with the civil rights movement as a domestic factor, the June 16, 1966 Black Power movement also had an impact on Black pastors who were creating Black theology. While the civil rights struggles linked Christianity with justice and church militancy, the Black Power movement situated the cultural identity of Blackness at the center of any real justice for African Americans. That meant the right of self-identity, the right to name one's Black and African self independent of white control, and the right of self-determination to control Black communities unhindered by white power. Now, in contrast to the civil rights efforts, Black Power swept every region of the country and affected every quarter of the African American community. Just as the civil rights movement came out of churches in the street fighting for Black people's human rights, the Black Power struggles came out of the backwoods and plantations of the rural South. In contrast to Martin Luther King Jr.'s generation, the youth wing of the civil rights movement had launched a new phase in the Negro struggle for full humanity. On June 16, 1966, in Greenwood, Mississippi, Stokely Carmichael and Willie Ricks shouted for the first time the slogan of Black Power: Carmichael and other members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had been working in Mississippi among poor, oppressed, and rural working class blacks. The youth wing had concluded that the civil rights movement needed to change its focus. From then on, the goal should be for black, poor, oppressed, and working class families in America to have power. They needed power to control their own land upon which they worked. They needed power to elect their own public officials. And they needed power to express their full black identity. In a word, the initial black power thrusts centered on poor, oppressed, and working class black families and their need for economic, political, and cultural power. When black Christian religious leaders created Black theology, in addition to the civil rights movement and the Black Power campaigns, they also were trying to answer questions raised by a 1964 book written by Joseph Washington. The book was titled Black Religion. Now, Washington was black, he was ordained, and he had a PhD. And he was very familiar with the mainstream black church. His book directly stated that only white churches had a theology. For him, no black church had a theology. Why? Because only white churches go back to Europe. He obviously hadn't encountered Dr. Hayes. He says, for him, no black church had a theology. Why? Because only white churches go back to Europe, and it is through Europe that the legacy of Jesus can be found. Now linked to the European tradition and the true church, American white churches had faith in the real Jesus Christ. Theology is thinking about whether or not we are faithful to Jesus' calling. For Washington, black churches did not have a theology because they were not connected to the European Christian church, the place of true history, and the place where faith in the real Jesus Christ could be found. There's a reason. Because of segregation. The black church didn't have access to any of these things: history, tradition, and faith. Now, if black churches didn't have any of these things, history, tradition, and faith, how could it have a theology? Again, theology is thinking about whether or not we are being faithful to the tradition, the birth, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus and the church he left behind. And black churches had no theology. So we can see that one of the reasons for the rise of black theology was to defend the black church, to show it was authentic, had a tradition, had a faith, had connections to Jesus Christ, and had a theology. Domestic factors, civil rights movement, black power movement, Joseph Washington's book. However, the influence of the civil rights and black power movements, along with Joseph Washington's book, all took place in the context of larger global developments. These worldwide events, the global factors, had impact on black churches and African American communities during that time. Specifically, African American pastors started black theology in the global context of a shift in world order. And so the second reason why black liberation theology began is the global factor. For instance, the post-World War II era positioned the U.S. government and its monopoly corporations as the undisputed champions of capitalism and American-led democracy in the non-communist world. The war's end also had an immediate impact on 1950s black civil rights efforts in the Southeast U.S. Black Americans supported this ideology of liberation from fascism and communism. These systems were based on either racial superiority or human rights violations. In the world's greatest government, if the world's greatest government had stopped Hitler's army and fought to make the world safe for democracy, then surely this same American government would soon resurrect its own black citizens from the death of racial apartheid at home. Oh, there we go. All right. Now I can see. Okay. The rhetoric and worldview championed by North American power structures abroad were taken very seriously by African Americans fighting against white supremacy and voting discrimination at home. But when black soldiers came back home, reality soon set in. Blacks began asking how the U.S. government, which was so sympathetic to people millions of miles away, could neglect, if not oppress, its own black citizens, many of whom lived a stone's throw away from the White House in Washington, D.C. And so we can see an evolving post-war debate about freedom, democracy, and equality helped to give rise to the civil rights movement. In fact, talk of a better world did help start the African American mass efforts for justice. But so too did the concrete reality of 1.2 million black Americans who fought abroad against Nazism and racial supremacy, and the 600,000 black folk who fought in the Korean War. Wars abroad made an incredible imprint on the historical experience of collective black America. African American GIs returning from tours of duty after World War II and the Korean War had accumulated first-hand knowledge of the world, especially about race relations. They learned that it was possible for white working-class youth from Mississippi to work with black working-class youth from backwoods Georgia when they united to defend America. The two antagonists in this instance could reconcile their differences in the midst of waging a war for a higher cause. All the white eugenics theorists, all the social determinist professors, and all the propagandizing politicians had been wrong, absolutely wrong. Life experience proved not racial irreconcilability, but rather racial unity, grounded in a justice goal. At minimum, war forced a functional unity for co-human survival. Furthermore, black soldiers abroad felt free for the first time relative to their home experiences. The only segregation the French sought was to identify and isolate the fascists. Well, you know how the brothers are. Black soldiers felt so liberated while in Europe that they even experimented with interracial relations with French and other white European women. To be seen by whites of Europe as simply other humans was a revolutionary education for black GIs. Discharged from duty, African Americans re-entered civilian life in the United States, determined not to let legal segregation prevent them from building a healthy community for their families and for all people. In addition to World War II and the Korean War, the anti-colonial wars in the Third World also fanned the flames of black church-led 1950s civil rights initiative and the 1960s Black Power challenges. African American communities and churches were well aware of the struggle for self-determination being fought by brown, yellow, and black people in the international arena. As early as 1938, for example, numerous black churches rallied to defend Ethiopia from Italy's invasion. India's independence from Great Britain in 1947 conveyed some of the first signs of hope. Mao Zedong's wave of Red Guards successfully moved the People's Republic of China out of the capitalist orbit in 1949. And starting with Ghana's independence ceremonies in 1957 and Nigeria's in 1959, European colonial administrations in Africa gave way to indigenous ruling structures. Also in 1959, just 90 miles from the USA mainland, mountain guerrillas began the process of resituating Cuba as an independent nation constituted by a very large majority African citizenry, which is mainly in the middle and the East Coast. So we only see the West Coast Cubans. World War II so captured the attention and resources of European colonial powers that it gave space for the nations of the globe, political and economic initiative, to assert themselves as independent actors. Thereafter, the Cold War between the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics further opened up the crack of opportunity for newly developing nations to fight for independence and national liberation. In the 1960s and 1970s, Black theology of liberation. In the 1960s and 1970s, Black theology put liberation at the center of Christianity and theology. In addition to their discovery of liberation in the Christian Bible, especially Luke chapter 4, verses 16 and following, this language of liberation was also impacted by the national liberation speeches and slogans of third world nations when they called for liberation from European colonialism in the 1950s and 60s. In the Christian family in the United States, Black theology, many have argued, was the first religious movement to clearly equate Jesus, the Anointed One, with the liberation of the oppressed in North America and the struggle against structures of white discrimination. My, what can come out the black church? Two other dynamics helped nurture the civil rights and black power movements and in turn the birth of black theology. One was a 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision that declared separate facilities for blacks and whites as inherently unequal. This Brown versus Board of Education verdict emerged partly from a reassessment of the world context by the U.S. government and its multinational corporations. To expand post-World War II American dominance, it was necessary to change the contradictions between domestic racial segregation on the one hand and on the other, U.S. rhetoric about America being the land of opportunity. The 1954 Supreme Court decision against segregated public facilities provided a major incentive for African American struggles for citizenship and full humanity. And that last factor was the Marshall Plan. This post-World War II economic program allowed American multinational corporations to penetrate Europe and help boost the American economy back home. With the domestic economy improving, American citizens became more positive about the future. Like other Americans, blacks expressed rising expectations about their education, about their standard of living for their children, and as a result, the belief that each generation of children would improve beyond the lifestyle of their parents increased tremendously. Now, we've got all these things going on. World War II, struggle for democracy against racial superiority of fascism. The Marshall Plan, helping the U.S. economy to get stronger and making all Americans more hopeful for their children. The 1954 Supreme Court decision outlawing segregation. The examples of people of color in Asia, Africa, Latin America fighting for independence, liberation, and for the human rights. The black church leading the civil rights movement. The rise of black power from black workers in rural America. And Joseph Washington's book directly saying the black church is not a Christian church and has no theology. Against this global and these domestic backdrops, a group of black religious leaders tried to answer the question, where was Jesus Christ in all of this? The founders of black theology were trying to understand where was Jesus Christ in the global and domestic factors. You got that? All right now. What was Jesus calling the black church and the black community to do in the midst of these global and domestic factors? In fact, what was the relation between Jesus' mission and these global and domestic factors? That was the why question. And now we move to the what. Black theology's content and method. Okay, everybody with me? All right. Those several factors laid the seeds for the sprouting of black theology liberation. The most immediate ingredient was the cry for black power put forth by the youth wing of the civil rights movement. We mentioned that, remember? This event forced a group of African American pastors to return to the Bible, to reread the Bible and various church traditions in order to give a theological interpretation of their contemporary situation. Where is Jesus Christ in the midst of these global and domestic factors? For them, these black pastors, God was already acting in history, both domestically and internationally. And so the role of theology is to figure out whether or not black pastors and black churches were being faithful to what God was already doing in their present situation. Because we know God is a God right on time, right? Okay, that's for my sermon tomorrow. Okay. So far, we've looked at the why question. Why did black theology emerge in specific and domestic contexts? Now we turn to the what question. What is the theological content and method of black liberation theology? Contemporary black theology liberation began specifically when the National Committee of Negro Churchmen, NCNC, the National Committee of Negro Churchmen wrote a full-page statement in the New York Times newspaper on July 31st, 1966. The title of their publication in the New York Times was called Black Power. The signatories, the people who signed, to that public theological statement were 47 black church men and 1 black woman religious leader. As we mentioned earlier, about 6 weeks prior to this New York Times statement, that is on June 16, 1966, the youth wing of the Civil Rights Movement had launched a new phase in the Negro struggle for full humanity. June 16, 1966, in Greenwood, Mississippi, Stokely Carmichael and Willie Rooks shouted, "Black Power." Now, as we mentioned, Black Power challenged all of society to shift its center of focus toward the black poor, oppressed, and working class families, their need for economic, political, and cultural power. So when these 48 black church leaders, 47 men and 1 sister, published their July 31st, 1966 New York Times statement, they were asking and answering the question about what should churches and theology have to say about poor and working class blacks needing economic, political, and cultural power. This was the theological content of black liberation theology. In their July 31st, 1966 statement, the 48 authors wrote, quote, "What we see shining through the variety of rhetoric of white Americans attacking black power is not anything new." Did you hear the Reverend? I'm giving her the Reverend Dr. Diana Hayes. It's not new, but the same old problem, they say, the same old problem of power and race which has faced our beloved country since 1619, close quote. Obviously, we also have to put in, too, that actually the first group of Africans didn't come to Jamestown, Virginia, English speaking. The first were Catholic. They were brought to Florida through the Spanish. So we have Dr. Cyprian Davis, get his book. He corrects everything. Okay. The English-speaking permanent settlement was my state, Jamestown, Virginia, 1619. Close quote. Now, when we look at that Black Power statement by these pastors, July 31st, 1966, there were 4 subheadings in the statement. Section 1, it says, "To the leaders of America, power and freedom." That's to the leaders of America. Section 2, "To white church men, power and love." Section 3, "To Negro citizens, power and justice." And the 4th subtitle, Section 4, "To the mass media, power and truth." These 48 black Christian leaders wrote about jobs, educational systems, equal opportunity, income disparities, de facto segregation, the fact that only a small group of middle-class Negroes have made progress in America in 1966. They wrote about the need to rebuild the urban areas. They wrote about the need for America to stop its wars of destruction abroad. Sound like 2016. They called on Negro churches to recognize the power they have and to use that power for the poor on earth instead of mainly pointing to after death, by and by. They called on these churches to recognize that Jesus was already working for social change among black communities that were struggling for justice now. Jesus was already with the working class and the poor. This July 31st statement sees America as our beloved homeland, so they were staunch patriots. But because America has not used its abundant resources to help the poor and the oppressed at home and around the world, these Negro pastors wrote, God's judgment was being pronounced on America. In this divine judgment, we find Jesus working with the poor and oppressed. So to be a Christian, all churches needed to go where Jesus was. And this Dr. Hayes mentioned this. And the role of theology was to reflect on this liberation reality as a way to enhance the full humanity of oppressed black workers and the poor. The 47 black churchmen and one sister, that's Anna Hedgeman. These 47 black churchmen and one black churchwoman wrote, quote, "From the Christian faith, there is nothing necessarily wrong with the concern for power," close quote. This is July 31st, 1966. The theological content for Christian churches in America, argued the black church leaders, is liberation, The theological content for all Christian churches in America is liberation. Jesus was born, lived, died, and lived again for the liberation of the poor, the oppressed, and the working people. The role of churches is to structure its rituals and institutions to serve the poor, like the Oblate charism. The calling of a Christian is to witness to the word of Jesus' liberation out into the streets. The long-term goal or hope of the Christian faith is to be led by the Holy Spirit to build up God's kingdom, they said, I would say commonwealth, on earth. These pastors, these founders of Black liberation theology, redefine the following doctrines of the faith. They redefine theology, they redefine Christology, they redefine ecclesiology, they redefine missiology, and they redefine, hallelujah, teleology. Okay? Now, that's 1966, July 31st, 1966, up to March 1st of 1969. These pastors, there were no professors. The black pastors created Black liberation theology. In fact, if you look at the archives, you'll see in their minutes that they met, the NCNC, they used Black liberation theology already between July 31st and 1968 and March 1st, 1969. Now, in March of 1969, James Hal Cone, an African Methodist Episcopal clergyman, published the first book on liberation theology, titled Black Theology and Black Power. And then in his second book, titled Black Theology Liberation in 1970. So they were sort of companions. Exact theological themes followed from Jesus' life of liberation. One reads the Bible by comparing the emancipation work of the divine in the written biblical texts with the emancipation work of the divine in the actual lives of the black poor. So it's a correlation. God was the divinity of compassion and love and a waymaker for the abused. God consciously chose to be born not among the wealthy and the powerful, but in a dirty, feces-filled barn with smelly animals. Now, I spent the summers in segregated Virginia on my grandfather's farm, and all y'all little Christmas creches with the little clean white baby, they ain't got nothing to do with the farm. You don't want to be born in a farm, you know? But anyway, I digress. Jesus, as a result, is God with the disadvantage of the earth. From this foundational reference, all Christianity is defined. I'm paraphrasing Cone and that first generation. The Holy Spirit carries on the work of Jesus through the faithful believers in the church. The church received its initial marks and basic doctrines from its working with and on behalf of the poor. Wherever the poor struggle for a better life and for full humanity for all peoples, one encounters the spirit of liberation. And so in order to enter heaven, ethics starts with empowering the homeless, the unemployed, the exploited, the prostitute, the abused, the thirsty, the hungry, the emotionally wounded, and the lowly. Now, though James Cone is correctly seen as the father of Black theology liberation, there was not an uncritical alliance between Cone and other founding members of Black theology liberation. They all agreed that liberation was important for Black religion. But the debate was over the content of this liberation. In fact, a look at the theological outlines of these different writers points to the major trends of Black theology even today. So, I'm a Black Baptist preacher, but I won't go on. I'm going to shortchange about 10 pages here. But basically what we're talking about is that we're trying to frame how Black pastors, 47 men and 1 woman, created Black theology liberation. Not in the seminary, not in divinity school, not in theological school. There weren't any professors then. I talked to James Cone. I said, Professor Cone, how many Black people had PhDs in systematic theology? He said, let's see. He said, Dr. King was killed April 4th, 1968. So when he died, I think we had 2 left. Okay? Maybe 3. That's all we try. This is where Black theology liberation. So when everybody says there's a gap between the church and the academy, the gap is the academy side. It's not the church side, because the Black church created Black theology liberation. And then the professors came in, and thank God for them, particularly Cone, they wrote the first books on it. But even Black theology of the first generation academics, those were PhDs, there was a rich debate There's never been any single black liberation theology. We know James Cone started it, but there was also J.D. Otis Roberts, who was the second person to write a black liberation book, and he claimed that God's liberation needed to be closely linked with reconciliation. So Cone starts off March 69, 1970, the first two books. He says, any person who's a true Christian have to see liberation as the center of the gospel. Otherwise, you're a barbarian. What is the word? You're apostate. What is the heretic? Right, you're heretic. Now, the brother ain't too far off, okay? Because if you, no, not the second part, but where the liberation piece. We're not heretics, okay? Because if you look at where in the Bible do we see the explicit declaration of Jesus about his coming? Why did God so love the world through God's grace and love, take the initiative from the infinity of divinity and divine time, cross, all right, into chronos, limited time, and take on the flesh of sinful humanity? Why? Was it for a prosperity gospel? Don't think so. Was it for a mega church? Don't think so. There's only one place in the Bible where Jesus says this is why God has come for humanity. Only one place. And to me, that's a pretty big pericope, don't you think? It's in Luke chapter 4, verses 16 and following. Jesus already been baptized by John the Baptist, and the dove, this is my son. Then he's tempted, because once you go up on the mountaintop, Satan gets busy, right? Baptized, anointed, Satan, three temptations. He defeats Satan, and then all right, now, calm down. All right. And then he lets us know. We let him know why. There's one reason why Jesus came. Luke chapter 4, verses 16 and following, he says what? The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. That Spirit he's talking about, that's the Spirit, the dove that descended at the baptism with John the Conqueror. Or John the Conqueror. That's John the Conqueror. That's John the Baptist, right? So Jesus wasn't crazy. He knew what he was talking about. That Spirit of God, the first person of the Trinity, has descended upon me. And that Holy Spirit, not any other pagan spirit, it's that Spirit he's talking about, has descended upon me when I was fully immersed like the Baptists do. We don't do no sprinkling. The Baptists, we go full immerse. That Spirit descended upon me, right? And what did God's Spirit say? That specific Spirit. He ain't talking about no general spirit. He's talking about that Spirit. And what does it say? That has anointed me to do what? Preach the gospel. To bring good news to the poor and oppressed, right? Now, this is the state of God's speech to the cosmos. Now, this is not I'm telling you, this is serious stuff. If you're a Christian, if I'm a Christian, I'll use I, 12 steps that say you use I statements, okay? Y'all just keep coming back, okay? All right? Now, to me, this is incredible. This is where God lays out God's providential grace of love for all the cosmology. Mars, Pluto, everywhere, black holes. Shouldn't that say something? And why did God choose? Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 is the kenosis, the emptying, where God chose to empty God's self. In seminary, we call it the kenosis pericope. That means the brother's trying to just let his hair down and, and hang out with the bloods on the corner. That's what he's talking about. Why did God do this? Why did God do this? Because chapter 4 in Luke. I'm ready to fight anybody up in here. You got another reason why God came? I'd like to hear it in the Q&A. Tell me why else did God come? And show me in the Bible. Don't tell me what... Hallelujah. Nuh-uh. I want to know, you show me in the Bible, the Word of God, any other reason why God came. I'm being a little provocative, but that's the way I teach, Now, that's important. This is God's first public announcement. And then he says, the brother, this was a brother, right? Not only the fact that he changed water into wine, that's a brother would do that, right? But and he's also from Africa, as Dr. Hayes has said historically, but also he said, now, in your time, I done fulfilled it. And then the brother Brother closed the book. It's like, he closed the book, all right? Didn't he say it? I'm in the Bible. Am I in the Bible? He said it. In your own time, it is done. You don't have to worry about Satan. You don't have to stay up all night crying, but where's that Negro? I said, I got pregnant. He done left me here. You ain't got, don't worry. I was my job. Don't worry. Don't, just go to sleep in peace. Because it is done already. He said, in your time, it is fulfilled. Okay. Now, that's one bookend. Why did God come in the why? Now, the other bookend, now I got all kinds of PhD. I went to Groton, I went to Dartmouth, and when I was age 14, taking college courses and got A pluses in all three at the age of 14, hallelujah. Okay? I got a little introduction, right? But I still am a Southern Baptist person who grew up in rural Virginia with a little Episcopalian flavor. I want to get to heaven. I want to get to heaven. And the older I get, and I see more green behind me than in front of me, I definitely want to get to heaven. I do. I want to get to heaven. We can define how, but I want to get somewhere beyond this, okay? Now, there's only one place in the Bible where Jesus gives us the criteria to get to heaven. Now, every Christian, the purpose of Christians is to have a new life. And the hope of Christianity globally is that it is one of the few religions, I've traveled a little bit, it is one of the few religions that gives hope to the oppressed. We have karma, you know, in Indian, in Shakti, in Hinduism, we have Taoism, Lao Tzu, we have Kongzi, Confucianism, okay? We can go on and all, we have, you know, Santeria, Candomblé, Cuba and Brazil, African traditional religions. You know, I'm a Christian, but I love all. So, I'm not either or, I'm both, but I know who I am. But one of the beautiful things is the hope that Christianity offers each of us individually and everybody around the world. So, a new life is what Christianity, for me it's heaven. For you it might be something else, okay? But anyway, to be a Christian is the hope that Jesus offers the world, right? There's so many, y'all have you seen that black Jesus out there? What's sister at? Oh, that's she. Okay. You seen the black Jesus? Now the Roman Catholic, the Oblates, they had no idea they had a black Jesus out there. That's why all the Protestants coming over here, because we want to see that black Jesus. So it gives us hope. Okay, it gives us hope. Okay, all right. There's only one passage, one pericope in the entire Bible where Jesus lays out the criteria to get into heaven. And to me, if you don't want to get into heaven, you're not a Christian. Heaven you can define however. If you don't want new life, stay with Satan. You know, go on back to Egypt. You remember they said that? Shoot, at least they fed us some food back in Egypt. Okay. I want to go across the Jordan. Hallelujah. Okay. I want to see my mama, my grandma, my great grandmama, big mama, everybody else. Our family goes back to Ghana. So I want to go all the way back and see my fathers and my mothers in Ghana. That's the Hopkins lineage. Okay. That was the introduction, but I put it anyway. Only one pericope, one place. Matthew 25, verses 31 and following. It is the only passage in the entire Bible where Christians are told how to get to heaven, how we define heaven. Does it say the first criteria is a prosperity gospel? No. Does it say a huge mega church? No. Does it? I got to watch now. I'll stop right there. Okay. It says, first of all, the criteria is for the entire world. Jesus doesn't talk about churches or denominations. He said all the people in the world. So denominations are important, but we have to see the larger picture that Jesus came for the whole world. So that's first of all the nations. And then he says the criteria, it's the sheep and goat, These are the criteria. So if you want to get to heaven, did you feed me? Did you clothe me? Did you give me water? Did you provide shelter? Did you visit me when I was sick? I would like to challenge everybody up in here to show me another passage in the Bible where Jesus gives criteria to get to heaven. To me, those are the great bookends of the Christian gospel. Why did God come? And how we can come with God. That's it. Like Sojourner Sue said, I'm preaching Jesus. That's my sermon, Jesus, okay? All right, now let's move on because I'm about to but to go somewhere else with that. But I'm giving a formal pinstripe suit lecture here. All right. So all we're talking about is the contributions of Black theology of liberation. And the liberation piece is rooted from their perspective, and my perspective as well, in the gospel of words of Jesus. Cone wrote the first book, and others raised other questions. J.D. Otis Roberts raised issues about reconciliation. Cecil Cone, James Cone's brother, raised questions about the African traditional religions part of it. Henry Mitchell wrote lots of books. He was part of the first generation. He raises the importance of liberation being linked and rooted in the church and not being hijacked by PhDs in the academy, although he was a doctor and honorary doctorate as well. The theological content and method of Black theology liberation was also impacted by its joining the Ecumenical Association of Third World Theologians, ETWAT, and there, for the first time, Black liberation theologians in the United States met regularly every year, sometimes twice a year, all over the globe, with all the first-generation liberation theologians in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Pacific, and the Caribbean. And in fact, that was the first time that Black Liberation Theology USA met Latin Americans. Before that, they had not. All right. And then we talk specifically about methodology, which I can go into a more extended during the question and answer. But basically, a theological method of Black liberation theology is to first recognize that Jesus, God, is already there. It's a humbling thing, okay? Even though you may be a pastor or academic or whatever, or both, Jesus is already there. And basically, we have to follow Jesus, because that's the method. And then we reflect on our practice. So recognize Jesus is there. Make a commitment to practice with the poor and the oppressed. That's don't talk about it. One, recognize Jesus is there. Two, be actively committed with the poor and oppressed. Three, then reflect theologically. Theology is the third step. Four, go back to the poor and oppressed. And of course, the consistent thing throughout is proclaim the good news. From the pulpit to the pew to the south side of Chicago. All right, where is Black theology liberation today? We looked at Black theology liberation by exploring two broad areas. First, we asked the question, why did Black theology begin when it did? And here we found that there were three specific domestic and international forces giving rise to Black theology. Second, we examined the what question, what is the content and method of Black theology? And now we discuss third and final aspect of Black theology, the where question. Where are the present trends in Black theology, and where will Black theology go in the future? The first trend in present-day Black theology stresses the importance of Africa in doing a Black theology liberation. It challenges us to consider the Black part in the discipline of Black theology. Specifically, the African trend focuses on Africa because, for them, Africa is the unique aspect that makes the theology Black. What does it mean to be Black in America if it is not because of Africa's origin, legacy, culture, and religions? The second trend, present-day trend, emphasizes the pastoral work of Black theology. For example, we find this in scholars such as James Harris, who is a PhD who pastors in Richmond, Virginia, Lee Butler, Joseph Brown, who's a Jesuit, his book, To Stand on the Rock, Meditation on Black Catholic Identity. And, of course, Cyprian Davis, OSB, we've already mentioned him, that historic, groundbreaking, and still classic text of his, quote, The History of Black Catholics in the United States. The third trend in Black theology today emphasizes social liberation, a call for radical transformation of material social systems, bringing pain upon the least in society. Of course, James Cone represents that. His latest book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree. Aubrey Hendricks' book on the political Jesus would be another. Gaylord Wilmore, Black Religion and Black Radicalism. And we can go on and on. The fourth trend represents where we are in today, Black theology. But, I'm sorry, that was the third trend, right? The fourth and final trend stresses Black religion and not theology. That is, they want to lift up religion and play down a theology. And some representatives there would be Charles Long, who's a historian of religion and not a Black theologian, has been one of the founders of this trend. Again, he is not a theologian. There's some others as well. Matthew Johnson's book, The Tragic Vision of African American Religion, would be a contemporary representative of this fourth trend, lifting up religion and minimizing theology. Now, these four trends represent in a schematic way where we are today in Black theology, but to complete this section on the where question, I want to close my remarks by pointing to where Black theological liberation needs to go into the future. Let me just say, I actually have a whole section on womanist theology, but I cut it out because I thought that I thought you was going to do it, so that's why I ain't doing it. But Black theology, as we mentioned, it starts from July 31st, 1966, and goes up to Cone's book, March 1969. Now, there were a group of Black women clergy PhD program students at Union Theological Seminary in the late 1970s. Jackie Grant, in particular, AME, Dolores Williams, who Baptist, and Katie Cannon, a Presbyterian, who now teaches in my home state, Virginia. In 1970, they were supporting the brothers in Black theology liberation at Union Seminary, right? And they were also supporting feminist liberation theologians like one of their big mentors, Bev Harrison, and others. But they began to see some friction from the other people. The Black male theologians began to attack them in some very misogynist ways. Not all, but some very. And then some of the feminist sisters says, well, we speak for all of y'all, the white feminists. They say, don't think so. The first article by womanists, which is actually Black feminists, but a precursor one, was 1979, written by Jacqueline Grant, who was a PhD student of James Cone's in Union Theological Seminary. And she talks about, it's called Black Woman and Black Theology. And she says, if Black theology liberation claims that it's liberation, why is it that they're oppressing Black women? And it took the same thing to the Black church, same argument, right? So generally, at least my read, sisters know because they lived it, is that article represents the beginning. And then eventually, let me put it this way. I actually think that womanist theology is the most universal theology in the world, okay? Because they embody it. They ain't got to just talk about it. They embody gender, they embody class, they embody race, they embody ecology, they embody intercultural generational movements, and they embody the global. So they embody 7 dimensions in their bodies, individually and corporate, more than any other person's globally and in the Christian family particularly. So I teach Black theology, first generation, second generation. I teach womanist theology, first generation and second generation. So I ain't no womanist, I'm an ally. I like woman though, so yeah. So, okay, what does that say? It says, if we're going to talk about Christianity, we cannot talk about Christianity in America or the world if we don't first start with womanist theology. You get that on the way home, okay? No other theology in America or the world embodies 7 dimensions of what God has called and created us to be. I like to hear that in the question and answer, along with why Jesus came here, what's the criteria to get to heaven. It's a third challenge to you. Come on now, get ready to fight. I fight in love, you know I don't fight. I'm like Michael Jackson, I'm a lover, not a fighter, so I'm just yapping. So that was the short piece on it. As Dr. Hayes mentioned, the Black Theology Group, which began in 1975, was co-chaired by Sean Copeland, a Roman Catholic sister. The other sister who was very much involved, religious sister, and also she's a sister she's like Dr. Addie. I call her sister. She's a religious sister, but she's a soul sister too, so she's sister squared, was Jamie Phelps. In fact, I met Jamie Phelps, Sister Jamie Phelps, and Sister Sean Copeland at that time. She's since no longer sister, in 1981. So that's when I first got to. Actually, Sister Jamie Phelps was one of my theological mothers back in the day. That's when I was 20 pounds younger and all black hair and my little afro. 20 pounds heavier and white hair and some hair left. But no, in fact, that's one of the first people I met in Black theology, and in liberation theology with Sister Jamie Phelps, just to put that out there. Okay. All right, you got that, right? Good. Now, what do I think about which way forward with Black theology today? And then we're out of here. I want to close my remarks by pointing to where Black theology liberation needs to go into the future. And part of these closing remarks is bullet points. I've been doing men's ministry in my church in Chicago since 1998, and so that's somewhat, on the south side of Chicago, so that impacts it as well. All theology is autobiographical. Women have taught us that. First, future trends. Black theology of liberation needs to deepen its role in African American churches. We need to have more educational opportunities, both for the lay and for the leadership. Those writing on Black theology need to keep the church as a central concern and audience. And clergy and lay have to take degree programs. So on the one hand, the theologians, particularly after we've been trained, all these we need to remember from whence our social location and whose shoulders we stand on. It's the church. And I'm not saying everything good about the black church is good. Everything about black male theology ain't good either. Don't let them fool you. And me as well. I'm a broken vessel as well. But on the side of the church, both the clergy and the lay have to take degree programs, like here at Oblate. I'm so glad to be here, Oblate, where Black theology and women's theology are part of the core curriculum. In other words, the whole practice and study of Black theology has to reorient itself to be in conversation and accountable to the church. Black theology has to be accountable to the church. Second future. One of the hallmarks of Black theology has been using an interpretation of the gospel that does a complex social analysis of society where everyday black people find themselves. In other words, we need to look at the social structure that we find black people in. Now, economically, politically, culturally, educationally, health-wise, we need to, like Dr. Hayes said, the African traditional worldview and our enslaved ancestors' worldview, there was no separation. That's the slave masters, missionaries, Christianity, and the slave. That was not our ancestors. So we need to know with the whole society. If we're talking about the poor and oppressed, who are the poor and oppressed? Who are the workers in America? Now, several black political economists, Julian Malveaux, Manning Marable, late Manning of Columbia, several political economists, several political scientists, such as James Philip Thompson at MIT, Ron Walters, late Ron Walters at University of Maryland, College Park, and the National Urban League have all stated that the state of the majority of black people today, the poor, the workers, is worse off than it was before the Civil Rights Movement. What the Civil Rights Movement has done is produce me, a small slither of black professionals who are high profile and represent at least media representation as the state of black America. On all indices of life, this is what the political scientists, and these are political economists, the ones I noted in National Urban League, they're saying on all the indices of what is life is worse. It's worse. It's worse. It's very have mercy. It is worse. In Chicago, from Friday to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon till Monday around 2 a.m., we say, how many people last week? Oh, 20 shot. Oh, how many? 25. Oh, how many? 17. Every weekend, even in the winter, hallelujah. So you know what the brother's doing in the summer, man. Okay? Between the ages of 19 and 26, 44% unemployment among black men. That's the official. Okay? Ray, baby, Shanae, hey, okay? And y'all know, if you go on the front line, you know, okay? If black people had an analysis, we're talking about social analysis. Part of the social analysis is look at the challenges and problems. This is trend number 2, social analysis. But the other part is look at the possibilities of social analysis. Do you know that if black people's purchasing power would make us the 16th largest GDP in the world, Can you imagine if all the black churches in America put our wealth together, what we could do, 16th country in GDP of the world? That's incredible. That is freaking incredible, as my daughter would say. I would say, watch that F word, girl. Okay, freaking, but don't get too close. Freaking is all right. It's just so the possibility and the potential of the black church and the black community are incredible. And we've got geniuses, and I'm particularly talking, I've been working with African Americans since 1998, this age group on the South Side. It's like, there are geniuses everywhere. Sister Linda, what is the name of that sister? Did she go to Harvard or that summer school? There was a sister who went to a high school in Memphis, and at one end of the school, the Cribs were. On the other end of the was what's the other one? Cribs and the Blood. But the brothers had some sense. Somebody be some sense. And the Cribs and Blood said, we will not touch this church. We will not touch the school in between. We'll let them go. So there's a sister there. This sister's going to go to Harvard. We met her in Memphis. Yeah, there you go. There are diamonds in the rough all over. There are some brothers I work with directly with undergrad. I haven't been the main leader, but I ain't want to put it, I mainly be writing Black Theology all the time and teaching Bible study. I do more education than preaching and organizing these days. But other brothers in my group. And these brothers, some of these brothers are math geniuses. If you can measure in your head how many ounces and pounds of the doobies and crack in your head so you don't leave a paper trail, and you know your distribution in your head. I can't even balance a book, hallelujah, checkbook. These brothers are geniuses. They are disturbed geniuses. So we're sober. We have if anybody has romanticism about poor and working class black people, they have never been poor and black, or they have never organized them. We're just liberals, okay? You don't have, there's some places I don't tell my daughters to go, and I don't drive on the south side of Chicago, and I'm a man. Okay? But these brothers, the potential part of social knowledge, we have to recognize that. And the other thing we talk about, now if we the reason why you say, what happened? Are you regressing back on your black liberation? No. If you stabilize them, the domestic violence will go. See, this is the whole thing. Stabilize those shorties. That would stop won't stop it, but that will lessen the domestic violence. Get them a job. The crime will go down. Teach them with homework. Okay, give them some support. That's all we're saying. It's like, because I talked to one of the, I ain't going to say who, but one sister, I love her so much. I was talking at the AAR. She said, it's a woman's sister. She said, I said, look, comrade, stabilize them. Everything you talk about, stabilize them. Because that's what we're saying. We're saying they're committing the crime. They're doing domestic violence, right? They're doing the raping, right? There was a horrible thing. There was a young brother, 9 years old, who was lured into the alley in Chicago. They executed this 9-year-old to get at his father. Stabilize that shooter. Okay? That's all we're saying. Stabilize these brothers. And there's going to have some repercussion effect. Now, on the other hand, we've got to also raise up this particular stuff with the sisters. But I'm just talking about the ministry I've been doing. Okay? So that's the logic to my madness here. Third future trend. Black theology liberation needs to be have more sophisticated studies of the positive role that African American men play as fathers and husbands and as other significant role models in the household and the church. Now, notice I said positive. I ain't say negative. Negative we got. I ain't positive. And we can go into that. Now the media dominates our conscious and unconscious levels with negative spirituality stereotypes. So we can talk about that. That's why I started my introduction off with who I'm the son of. Okay? They can say, oh my God, no, come on, let's talk about it, I think Jesus might have something to say about that. Fourth, the urban areas of America are full of young black men between the ages of 8 and 25. Black theology with the churches need to proclaim a practical gospel of liberation and healing to them. Okay? Young men on the south side of Chicago have done a documentary where they call on black leaders in the churches to provide more positive activities for them, and which I can give a whole list. Like this is literally a documentary. It's called The Streets Will Kill. So maybe you can look it up. Will Kill. They interview current gang members. I mean, I don't know how they even got them together. They said, what do you want, man? We want more black professional men in our neighborhoods. We don't have any role models. We want YMCAs. We want Boy Scouts. We want jobs. We want second chance educational opportunities. We want to be mentored by older black men who believe in God. These are the brothers, okay? These are the brothers running around with the pants hanging down. Which, by the way, and I'm not making excuses because I'm very sober. Okay, I know who I want my daughter to marry. Both of them. Now, if you come up to my crib with your pants down and say, Mel Hawkins, I'm talking to your daughter. What? No, I ain't no Mel Hawkins. You call me Dr. Hopkins. Can I date your daughter? So I ain't fantasizing. If you romanticize a black male poor in the ghetto, you ain't never been poor or you never organized the poor. Okay, you're just a liberal living on the daggone. So they've asked us what they need. And one of the things they asked us is more black professional men who believe in God. It's an awesome thing. Okay? Fifth future trend, black theology and the churches have to continue our legacy of connecting our domestic USA witness and ministries with Africa and the larger developments and taking place around the world. So we need to link domestic to the global. You may not remember this, but from August of 1619, when the first permanent English-speaking Africans, 17 men, 3 women were brought on a Dutch man-of-war ship to Jamestown, Virginia in August 1619. So that's the beginning of the permanent English-speaking. We know the historic was a Catholic in Spain, in Florida. But the permanent English-speaking is in Jamestown. 17 men, African brothers, 3, were brought on a Dutch man-of-war. Now, we can debate it, whether it's Sierra Lincoln or Lerone Bennett or whomever. To me, they were slaves because they bartered them. They sold them to John Rolfe for water and provisions. But that's another book we're working on. Okay, so from August of 1619, when the first group of enslaved Africans came, 17 men and women, up until Nelson Mandela's release in 1991, every major movement for justice, civil rights, and liberation, human rights in America on the part of black people was always linked to Africa and the globe. After Nelson Mandela came out in 1991, black movements are no longer linked to Africa and the globe. I like to debate that too. You give me the evidence, I can show you the evidence now. You see, right, Dr. Hayes? When we got them PhDs in Louvain and all that, we had to do footnotes, didn't we? Okay, we weren't just hallelujah. We were doing that too, but not at the seminary. We had to do footnotes. So let's, if you wanted to, give me some evidence now. Okay, y'all young scholars, don't be just, you give me the evidence, to give me the counter evidence, because I can prove it from August 1619 to 1991, always linked to Africa and the world. 1991 to February 1st, 2016, which will be Monday, no linkage. So one of the future trends we got to reconnect. Sixth trend. Black theology and the black churches need to explore how to get access to earth, air, and water. And how to govern earth, air, and water. And I'm working with a couple of queer sisters, black sisters in my class. They're in the Black Lives Movement. They talking. I said, sister, let me tell you what happened in that. I was alive back in the day. We need to help the young people, particularly Black Lives Matter, understand what were we fighting for. Okay, and don't reinvent the wheel. I asked young people today, particularly brothers and sisters, I said, answer me 2 questions. I know y'all talking about fire to me. What do you want personally out of the movement? See, this is a question that was not asked to Dr. King or Malcolm X or Stokely Carmichael or Willie Reed. What do you want personally out of this movement? With the Black Lives Matter. 2, if you had $2 billion, how would you govern America? You answer those 2 things, I know if I fall. If you can't answer, I'm not following. I don't care if it's Black Lives Matter or Green Lives Matter. See, those 2 questions are so central. On the question of govern, we're talking about how do you govern earth, air, and water? All of reality is earth, air, and water. That's all it is. It's just that the 1% is very clear. They are clear that what the bottom line is earth, air, and water. Okay. Anybody in here own earth, air, and water? I didn't say earth, wind, and fire. Okay, I was thinking. I said, do you own earth, air, water? All right, you got a little house, got a little backyard, got a little garden going on. I ain't going to out nobody, but you got a little garden going on. Okay, I'm talking about the people who own downtown Chicago, the land. I'm talking to people who own Market Street in San Francisco. I'm talking to people who own the Wall Street, not just the sign, but the street. Okay? I'm talking about a family that owns part of the land of 1/3 of Southern Connecticut, one family. I'm talking about a family in Colorado who owns oil wells in Colorado and Texas. I'm talking about a family who owns the majority of industrial property in Chicago land and almost the entire state of Illinois. These are the 1%. I'm not talking about Mitt Romney's elevator in his cars. That's front fancy. I'm talking about old money. I'm talking about this one. There's 7 families that can trace their history back to this what is that thing? The Pilgrims. There's 7 families in America who can okay. I'm talking about them. I'm talking about the guy that says when he turned 50 years old, he said, "Hey, Dwight, what you gonna do when you're 50?" I said, "I'm just gonna go take the family for get a little burger of sushi or something." He said, well, "I'm gonna buy me a private jet." By the way, I've actually flown on the jets. You got to know what the 1% want, you know. Everybody I'm naming, I know they went to Groton, okay, and Exeter and Andover. I don't just hang out in the south side of Chicago. I want to find out how do we get the new generations, the next generation, 3 generations, to govern earth, air, and water. Because a lot of things what's going on, we're becoming addicted to corporate and social media. Why is it that we don't control what's external spirit that comes into the Holy Spirit inside of us? Let me finish by challenging you this as a Black Theology future trend. I would like for each of us for one day to focus on how to balance, in harmony and balance, the internal energy in our body for one day. What that means is just one thing. Sorry, 2 things. The first is to focus on the breathing throughout the day. And the second thing is when you get up, don't turn on television, radio, anything. From the time you get up in your car, jogging, to the time you go, don't turn anything on. See if you can do that. And if you cannot do that, you are possessed by Satan's spirit. Okay? I tried it. And I'm ordained, Reverend, double PhD, hallelujah. It is very hard to keep demonic spirituality out of the Holy Spirit that's in us. Try it. That's what Black Theology hopes. If we can all do that, colors, genders, sexual orientations, all over the world, can we imagine if we got that Holy Spirit energy? Christians, we call it Holy Spirit. In Hinduism, they call it Shakti. In Taoism, they call it Chi. Confucianism calls Confucius wisdom. Karma, Buddhism, African traditional religion call it, ancestors. Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, they call it the Orisha. Can you imagine all over the world if all almost 8 billion people on earth were to focus on harmony and balance of the Spirit in us? That would be a lovely thing.